10-year-old boy reveals secrets of the Dead Sea Scrolls. Discovery in the Cave of Horror shocks the world. The ancient fragment trembled in Dr. Leah Cohen's gloved hands as the small boy reached across the laboratory table, his eyes transfixed on the brittle parchment behind its protective glass. "You're holding it upside down," he said matter-of-factly. "And that word isn't sacrifice, like you think. It's covenant. The dialect is Northern Judean, not Standard Hebrew." The room of distinguished archaeologists and biblical scholars fell silent. Dr. Cohen carefully rotated the glass enclosure, studying the faded text from the newly discovered scroll fragment recovered from the Cave of Horror in Israel's Judean desert. The team had been struggling with this particular passage for weeks. "Ethan, honey, please don't interrupt, Doctor." "Cohen's work," Sarah Matthews whispered, gently pulling her 10-year-old son back from the table in the climate-controlled laboratory of the Israel Antiquities Authority in Jerusalem. But Dr. Cohen was staring at the boy, her expression shifting from annoyance to curiosity. She turned to a colleague and whispered something. The colleague shook his head in disbelief, then typed frantically on a laptop. "How do you know that, Ethan?" Dr. Cohen asked carefully. The boy shrugged, suddenly self-conscious with all eyes on him. "Because I wrote it," he said quietly. "Well, not me, exactly. But I was there. I was the scribe, Eleazar ben Aaron. We were hiding from the Romans during the revolt." Sarah Matthews closed her eyes in embarrassment. Her son's fascination with history had always been intense, but this was different. They were only in Israel because she was documenting the latest archaeological finds for National Geographic. Bringing Ethan had seemed educational, not an opportunity for him to disrupt important research with fantastical claims. "I'm so sorry," she began, but Dr. Cohen raised a hand to silence her. "The computer analysis just confirmed it," the colleague announced, looking up from his laptop. "The text is indeed inverted, and the suggested translation of that passage using Northern Judean dialectical variations makes more linguistic sense than our working hypothesis." "But how could he possibly know that?" Dr. Cohen leaned toward the boy. "Ethan, can you read more of this?" "Of course," he replied, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "We wrote in columns right to left. This section describes the hidden cache of temple records we evacuated before Jerusalem fell." I encoded references to their locations within the text. Sarah watched in growing disbelief as her son began to read the ancient text fluently, without hesitation, pointing out subtle details and explaining context that had eluded the experts. His pronunciation contained inflections no modern scholar could authenticate, but that matched linguistic theories about how ancient Hebrew and Aramaic might have sounded. The following morning, after a series of preliminary tests confirmed Ethan's unexpected translations were plausible, Dr. Tzachutfi, Abram Levin, director of the Dead Sea Scrolls Preservation Project, invited the Matthews to his office. "Mrs. Matthews, what we're witnessing is unprecedented," Dr. Levin explained, hands folded on his desk. "Your son has accurately translated passages that our best scholars have debated for weeks. He's identified contextual elements that align with archaeological evidence but aren't documented in any available reference material. We'd like permission to work with him more formally." Sarah shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "This is all very strange. Ethan has always been interested in ancient history, but he's never studied ancient Hebrew or Aramaic. He can barely keep up with his regular Hebrew lessons at Sunday school." "Has he ever claimed past life memories before?" Dr. Levin asked carefully. "No, never," Sarah replied. "He's imaginative. But this is different. It started when we visited the Scrolls exhibition yesterday. He became almost transfixed. Ethan, who had been quietly drawing in a corner of the office, looked up. It's because seeing the scrolls reminded me. The memories were always there, just sleeping. I was Eleazar, a trained temple scribe. We fled when the Romans came. I was 32 when I died in the cave. His voice carried no childish uncertainty, just the simple conviction of someone stating obvious facts. Sarah felt a chill run through her. If what Ethan is experiencing is real, in whatever sense, it could be revolutionary for our understanding of these texts, Dr. Levin said. We'd like to conduct some controlled tests, with your permission. The next day, under careful observation, Ethan was presented with scroll fragments he hadn't previously seen, mixed with some modern replicas as controls. Without hesitation, he identified the authentic fragments and provided translations that experts would later verify as plausible and innovative. When shown photographs of the Cave of Horror where recent fragments had been recovered, he became visibly emotional. That's where we hid during the final days, he said, tracing the contours of the cave entrance in the photograph. There's a chamber deeper inside that they haven't found yet, behind the western wall, where the rock formation looks like a lion's head. That's where I hid the most important scrolls before the Romans found us, Doctor. Cohen exchanged glances with her colleagues. That specific area of the cave system hadn't been fully explored due to dangerous conditions, but ground-penetrating radar had indeed suggested a possible chamber in that approximate location. Ethan, did Eleazar hide something special there? She asked. The boy nodded solemnly. The covenant texts, records of the temple lineage, and the chronicle of the uprising. I was entrusted with them because of my position in the temple hierarchy. I encoded their location in the margin notes of the Psalms scroll, but they must not have found that part yet. Later that evening, in their hotel room, Sarah found Ethan drawing intricate maps of cave systems and writing in a script that seemed to flow naturally from his hand, a script that looked remarkably similar to the Dead Sea Scrolls, Herodian-era Hebrew, that she had seen in the museum. "Ethan, sweetheart," she began cautiously, "where did you learn to write like this?" He looked up, his eyes reflecting a depth she'd never seen before. "Mom, I know it sounds crazy, but I remember being him. I remember the feel of the reed pen on parchment, the smell of the ink we made from gall nuts and gum arabic. I remember the cold nights in the caves, the hunger as our supplies dwindled, the prayers as we heard the Roman soldiers searching." Sarah sat beside him on the bed, examining his drawings. The details were extraordinary. Architectural features of ancient temple structures, topographical maps of the Judean wilderness, and astronomical charts that seemed to function as some kind of calendar. "Are you afraid?" she asked finally. Ethan considered this. Sometimes, the memories of how it ended are scary, but mostly it feels important. Like I need to help find what was hidden. Like I made a promise. The next week was a whirlwind of controlled tests, interviews, and preliminary psychological evaluations. Ethan correctly identified obscure historical details that were later verified through archaeological records. He drew accurate maps of excavation sites he had never visited and described religious practices from the Second Temple period that aligned with scholarly research but included details never documented in surviving texts. News of the remarkable American boy spread through academic circles, though the Israel Antiquities Authority maintained strict confidentiality to protect both Ethan and the integrity of their research. Debates raged among the scholars. Was this an elaborate hoax? A case of cryptomnesia where the boy had unconsciously absorbed information? Or something more difficult to explain through conventional scientific frameworks? Dr. Cohen, initially the most skeptical TD, became Ethan's strongest advocate after he helped her team decipher a particularly challenging text fragment that revealed previously unknown details about temple worship practices. Whatever the explanation, his insights are too valuable to dismiss, she argued during a heated research team meeting. I propose we organize a limited expedition to the western chamber he described in the Cave of Horror. If we find nothing, we reevaluate our approach. If we find something... She left the implications hanging in the air. The discovery of new, intact scrolls would be the most significant archaeological find in decades. 3 days later, a small expedition team, including Dr. Cohen, Dr. Levin, 2 cave specialists, and a documentary filmmaker assembled at the entrance to the Cave of Horror. After considerable debate, Sarah had been allowed to bring Ethan, though he would remain in the secure base camp near the cave entrance with her and a staff archaeologist while the main team explored deeper. But as the team prepared their equipment, Ethan became increasingly agitated. "That's not the right way," he insisted, pointing to the route marked on their cave maps. "The passage has collapsed since then. You need to go through the southern tunnel. There are markings, 3 notches in the stone that look like the Hebrew letter shin. That's how we mark the safe path. Dr. Andititusanantitadatian." Levin hesitated, then directed one of the cave specialists to make a preliminary inspection of the southern passage. 20 minutes later, the specialist returned, his expression a mixture of confusion and excitement. "The boy is right. The main passage shows signs of an ancient collapse, but the southern tunnel is intact, and there are markings exactly as he described. 3 notches that resemble the letter shin." A tense silence fell over the group. Dr. Cohen knelt beside Ethan. "How did you know about the collapse? It's not visible from the entrance." "Because I was there when it happened," he replied simply. "During the final Roman assault, their battering rams against the cliff face caused the cave mouth to partially collapse. We thought we were trapped, but I found the southern passage. That's when I marked it, to guide any survivors back to the hidden chamber." The expedition leaders conferred quietly. Then Dr. Levin approached Sarah. "Mrs. Matthews, I know this wasn't the plan, but given Ethan's knowledge, would you consider allowing him to guide us, just to the first major junction? He would be harnessed to our most experienced guide, with full safety equipment." Sarah looked at her son, who was now calmly examining the ancient markings near the cave entrance with the focused attention of someone revisiting a familiar place. "It's important, Mom," Ethan said, sensing her hesitation. "I promised I would protect the scrolls until they could be found again. That's why I remembered. That's why I came back." The amber glow of the team's headlamps cast eerie shadows on the ancient limestone walls as they moved cautiously through the southern passage of the Cave of Horror. Ethan walked confidently between Dr. Datituyanafadriuo, Cohen, and the lead cave specialist, his small hand occasionally reaching out to touch the rock face with a familiarity that unnerved the adults. "There should be another marking here," he said, stopping abruptly at a junction where the tunnel forked. 3 vertical lines with a horizontal slash, the symbol for the word truth in our secret notation. The cave specialist directed his beam at the wall, revealing nothing but weathered stone. He exchanged a skeptical glance with Dr. Levin, who had been documenting every step of their journey on a digital recorder. "Ah, are you certain, Ethan? Perhaps the marks eroded over time," Dr. Cohen suggested gently. Ethan shook his head, running his fingers over a section of the wall with absolute certainty. It was carved deep. It should be here. He brushed away a thin layer of calcite deposits, and there it appeared, faint but unmistakable, 3 vertical lines intersected by a horizontal stroke, exactly as he had described. The team fell silent as the cave specialist photographed the marking from multiple angles. "The right fork leads to a dead end," Ethan continued matter-of-factly. "It was meant to mislead pursuers. The left passage descends to the chamber." Dr. Levin cleared his throat. "The radar mapping supports this. The left passage appears to continue for approximately 40 meters before opening into a larger space." The group proceeded carefully, with Sarah watching her son's every move. The transformation in Ethan was subtle but profound. His usual energetic bounce replaced by a measured, almost reverent gait. Even his voice seemed altered, his normal childish enthusiasm giving way to the calm authority of someone intimately familiar with their surroundings. 20 minutes later, the passage widened into a natural chamber roughly the size of a small classroom. Ethan walked directly to the western wall, where an unusual rock formation protruded. "This is the lion's head I told you about," he said, pointing to the formation that, when lit from below, indeed resembled a stylized lion. "The chamber entrance is behind it, sealed with stones and clay to make it look like natural rock. The archaeological team spent hours carefully examining the wall, using ground-penetrating radar and other non-invasive techniques to verify Ethan's claim. By mid-afternoon, they had confirmed the presence of an artificial structure behind the natural formation, what appeared to be a carefully constructed stone barrier. "We'll need proper excavation equipment and documentation protocols before proceeding further," Dr. Levin announced. "If there is a sealed chamber that's remained untouched for nearly 2,000 years, the conditions inside could be perfect for preservation. We can't risk contamination or damage." Ethan, who had been patiently observing their work, suddenly became agitated. "But the air will harm them once you open it. The scrolls are in clay jars, but some had cracked, even before I sealed the chamber. They need special handling." Dr. Cohen knelt beside him. "Ethan, how do you know some of the containers were already damaged?" The boy's expression shifted subtly, a shadow of ancient grief passing over his young features. "Because we were rushing. The Romans had discovered the cave system. We had only hours to hide the most sacred texts. Marta, she was just 12, dropped one of the jars as we were transferring them. I wrapped those scrolls in extra layers of linen before placing them in the stone niches." "Who was Marta?" Sarah asked quietly, noticing the unusual softness in her son's voice. "My sister," Ethan replied, his eyes distant. "She didn't survive the siege. None of them did, except me. And I only lived long enough to seal this chamber before the soldiers found me." The casual description of his own death, or rather Eleazar's death, sent a chill through the chamber. Dr. Levin signaled to the team's psychologist, who had been observing quietly, to make note of this exchange. That evening, back at their base camp outside the cave, the research team debated their next steps, while Sarah watched Ethan sleeping peacefully in their tent. Dr. Cohen joined her, offering a cup of tea. "How are you holding up?" she asked. Sarah sighed. "I don't know what to believe. Part of me wants to dismiss this as an elaborate fantasy. But then he does something like today, identifying hidden markings, knowing exactly where to look. It's beyond explanation." "The scientific community is equally divided," Dr. Cohen admitted. "Some colleagues are already proposing theories about genetic memory, or even suggesting that Ethan might have unconsciously accessed information through some form of cryptomnesia. Others are taking the reincarnation claims more seriously, particularly those from religious backgrounds." "And what do you think?" Sarah asked. Dr. Cohen considered this carefully. I think that regardless of how Ethan knows what he knows, the knowledge itself appears valid and historically significant. Tomorrow's excavation could potentially revolutionize our understanding of the Bar Kokhba period. The next morning, a larger team arrived with proper excavation equipment and preservation materials. Under the guidance of senior conservators, they began the delicate process of documenting and removing the stones concealing the hidden chamber. Ethan watched intently, occasionally offering comments about the original construction. "We used clay from the Dead Sea, mixed with lime and ash to seal the edges," he explained to one of the conservators. "It would have hardened like concrete over time." By mid-afternoon, they had created a small opening into the chamber. The team's lead conservator inserted a specialized endoscopic camera, and the images transmitted to a monitor set up in the main cave area drew gasps from the assembled researchers. The sealed space, approximately 3 meters square, contained multiple ceramic vessels placed in carved niches along the walls. Several appeared intact, their sealed lids still in place. On a low stone platform in the center lay what looked like leather scroll cases, stacked and apparently undisturbed. "Impossible," whispered Dr. Levin. "The preservation is remarkable. If those contain what I think they do—" "Wait, the covenant texts are in the jar to the right of the entrance," Ethan interrupted, pointing at the screen. "The chronicles are in the leather cases. The genealogical records are in the far corner, wrapped in blue-dyed linen." As if to confirm his statement, the camera panned to reveal what appeared to be fabric-wrapped bundles in the exact location he had indicated, the ancient blue dye still faintly visible in the camera's light. The controlled excavation continued for days, with each artifact meticulously documented before being removed in specially designed containers. Preliminary analysis confirmed they had discovered dozens of previously unknown texts, including what appeared to be first-hand accounts of the Bar Kokhba revolt, detailed temple records, and religious texts that had been thought lost to history. Ethan's assistance proved invaluable. He could identify the contents of sealed jars based on small markings that scholars had previously misinterpreted. He explained the organizational system used to arrange the texts and provided context for references that had puzzled experts for decades. News of the discovery spread through academic circles, and despite efforts to maintain confidentiality, leaked information soon reached the media. Headlines worldwide proclaimed the miraculous discovery in the Cave of Horror, with some reports mentioning a child prodigy who had somehow led researchers to the find. As public interest intensified, Sarah noticed Ethan becoming increasingly withdrawn. He experienced nightmares about Roman soldiers and woke up crying for people whose names he'd never mentioned before: Marta, Josiah, Rabbi Akiva, Dr. Rosen, the team's psychologist, spent several sessions with Ethan, documenting his accounts of life during the Bar Kokhba period. The details were consistent and historically accurate, including aspects of daily life that weren't well documented in existing historical records, but aligned with recent archaeological evidence. Whatever the explanation, these episodes are taking an emotional toll on him, Dr. Rosen explained to Sarah after a particularly difficult session. He's experiencing genuine grief for people he believes he knew in another life. The memories of violence and loss are traumatic, even if experienced as something from a past life. A week into the excavation, the team made their most significant discovery yet: a complete scroll containing what appeared to be Eleazar's personal account of the revolt, including details about the resistance's organization, key battles, and the final days in the caves. Most remarkably, it mentioned specific artifacts that had been hidden in other locations. "There's one more chamber," Ethan announced during a team briefing, "deeper in the cave system. It contains the most sacred texts, the ones saved from the temple before its destruction." The Chronicle mentions it, doesn't it? Dr. Cohen nodded slowly. There's a reference to what translates roughly as the final repository, but the directions are encoded in some kind of numerical system we haven't deciphered yet. It's based on the psalm numbers, Ethan explained. The sequence refers to specific verses that, when read together, describe landmarks in the cave system. I can show you. The revelation sent a new wave of excitement through the team. But Sarah noticed her son's hands trembling as he spoke. That night, she found him sitting outside their tent, staring at the stars with tears streaming down his face. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" she asked, wrapping a blanket around his shoulders. "I'm starting to forget," he whispered. "Some of the memories are fading. I think once we find the final chamber, Eleazar can rest. But I'm afraid I'll forget everything before we find it." "Would that be so terrible?" Sarah asked gently. "To just be Ethan again?" He considered this, wiping his eyes. Eleazar made a promise to protect those texts until they could be found again. I need to help him keep that promise. After that, I think it would be okay to just be me. The next morning, an expanded team ventured deeper into the cave system, following Ethan's interpretation of the coded directions. The boy moved with growing urgency, as if racing against his fading connection to Eleazar's memories. Several hours into their exploration, they reached a section where a partial collapse had blocked the passage. The cave specialists deemed it too dangerous to proceed without proper equipment to shore up the unstable area. "We'll return tomorrow with structural supports," Dr. Levin decided. Safety must come first. Ethan stood before the rock fall, his expression torn between childish disappointment and something deeper, a profound sense of loss that seemed far beyond his years. "It's just beyond this," he said quietly. "So close, after all this time." That night, as the team prepared for the final phase of exploration, Sarah found Ethan meticulously drawing a detailed map of what he believed lay beyond the collapsed section, a hidden chapel-like chamber carved into the living rock, containing the most sacred scrolls from the Jerusalem temple, hidden there by refugees fleeing the city's destruction decades before the Bar Kokhba revolt. "How clear are these memories now?" she asked, noticing how he hesitated occasionally, erasing and redrawing certain details. "Like trying to remember a dream after waking up," he replied. "Still there, but fading around the edges. By tomorrow, I think I'll still remember enough to find it." After that, he trailed off, looking both relieved and saddened by the prospect. As dawn broke over the Judean desert, the team prepared for what might be their most historic day yet. Ethan stood at the cave entrance, looking smaller and somehow more childlike than he had in days, as if Eleazar's presence was already beginning to recede, allowing the 10-year-old boy to gradually re-emerge. The morning sun cast long shadows across the rugged terrain as structural engineers worked to stabilize the collapsed section of the cave passage. Ethan sat nearby on a flat rock, eyes closed in concentration, his fingers tracing invisible patterns in the air as if recalling something just beyond his grasp. "Are you okay?" Sarah asked, sitting beside her son. "It's like trying to hold water," he replied, opening his eyes. "The memories are slipping away faster now. I know what's in the final chamber, but the details are blurring. Yesterday I could have drawn you a map of every shelf and niche. Today it's shadowy." Dr. Cohen approached them, carefully picking her way across the rocky ground. "The engineers say they've stabilized the passage enough for a small team to proceed. We'll be using additional supports as we go. Ethan, do you still feel you can guide us?" The boy nodded, though Sarah noticed a flicker of uncertainty cross his face. As they prepared to enter, Dr. Levin gathered the core team for final instructions. This will be a documentation-only expedition, he emphasized. No artifacts will be removed until we've fully assessed the preservation conditions and structural stability of the chamber. Dr. Chen will lead with the imaging equipment, followed by Dr. Q. Cohen and myself with Ethan. The rest of you will maintain positions along the secured route in case we need to evacuate quickly. Sarah hugged her son before he joined the advance team. Be careful in there, sweetheart. If anything feels wrong or scary, you tell them immediately, okay? I'll be fine, Mom, Ethan assured her with a hint of his normal 10-year-old impatience. I've been here before, remember? The small team proceeded through the newly secured passage, moving slowly under the low ceiling. Ethan walked between Dr. Cohen and Dr. Levin, his headlamp illuminating ancient soot marks on the cave ceiling, evidence of oil lamps from nearly 2 millennia ago. Eleazar was here, he whispered, touching one of the marks. We used olive oil lamps to light our way. The last time we came, we were almost out of oil. We had to work mostly by touch. 20 meters past the collapse, the passage opened slightly, revealing a wall that appeared natural at first glance, but, upon closer inspection, showed subtle signs of human modification. Unlike the previous chamber entrance, this one had no obvious markings or distinguishing features. It was designed to be invisible, Ethan explained, running his hand along the seemingly solid rock face. Even if someone made it this far, they would turn back thinking it was a dead end. He moved to a specific section of the wall and pressed his palm against it. There should be a slight depression here, just enough to fit 4 fingers. Then it pivots. Dr. Chen scanned the area with specialized equipment, confirming an anomaly consistent with Ethan's description. There appears to be a concealed pivot mechanism built into the rock itself. Remarkable engineering for that period. After thorough documentation, the team carefully applied pressure to the section Ethan had identified. With a grinding sound that echoed through the passage, a portion of the wall rotated inward, revealing a narrow entrance barely wide enough for an adult to pass through sideways. We made it small deliberately, Ethan said. Roman soldiers in armor couldn't fit through easily, giving defenders time if the hiding place was discovered. The stale air that emerged from the opening had been undisturbed for centuries. Environmental specialists took samples before allowing the team to proceed, confirming oxygen levels were safe, but warning that their presence would inevitably alter the chamber's perfectly preserved conditions. Dr. Cohen went first, sliding sideways through the narrow opening with a specialized camera. Her gasp was audible to those waiting outside. It's intact. Her voice came through their communication system. Completely untouched. There are niches carved into the walls, stone shelves, ceramic vessels still sealed. It's like stepping directly into the 2nd century. One by one, the small team entered the chamber, with Ethan being helped through the narrow opening last. As his feet touched the ancient floor, he froze, his expression transforming from concentration to recognition. The sanctuary, he whispered, using a Hebrew word that Dr. Levin later noted was an archaic form not used in modern language. The last refuge of the sacred. The chamber, roughly 5 meters square, had been laboriously carved from the living rock, its walls smoothed and niches cut with remarkable precision. Stone shelves lined 3 walls, holding clay jars, leather scroll cases, and wooden boxes with ornate carving. In the center stood a stone table reminiscent of an altar, on which rested a copper scroll, its green patina gleaming dully in the light of their headlamps. That's the key, Ethan said immediately, pointing to the copper scroll. It contains the inventory and the lineage attestation, proof of authenticity for the temple texts. Dr. Levin approached the altar reverently, careful not to disturb anything. If this is what I think it is. There were rumors of a copper inventory scroll in historical texts, but most scholars dismissed it as legend. To find one intact, Eleazar was entrusted with it because his family line traced back to Aaron. Ethan explained, his voice taking on that disconcerting adult cadence again. He was deemed worthy to protect the most sacred texts. The documentation process took hours, with each shelf, niche, and artifact meticulously photographed and recorded. Preliminary assessment suggested the chamber contained over 60 distinct document sets, many appearing completely intact. An unprecedented find that dwarfed even the original Dead Sea Scrolls discovery in historical significance. Ethan moved through the chamber with increasing disorientation, occasionally stopping to press his hands against his temples as if fighting a headache. He identified several key artifacts, including what he claimed were fragments rescued from the temple in Jerusalem before its destruction by the Romans in 70 But his descriptions became less precise, his certainty wavering. "Are you all right?" Dr. Cohen asked, noticing his distress. "The memories are fading faster now," he said, his voice wholly childlike again. "It's like they're being erased as we find each thing. I think Eleazar is letting go." By late afternoon, the preliminary documentation was complete, and conservation specialists had established protocols for the eventual removal and preservation of the artifacts. The team prepared to exit the chamber, leaving monitoring equipment in place to track any environmental changes caused by the opening. As they were about to leave, Ethan suddenly turned back, walking directly to a small, unremarkable niche, partially hidden behind a stone protrusion. Without hesitation, he reached in and removed a small clay cylinder sealed with wax. "This is for me," he said simply. "Eleazar left it for whoever would find this place. I can feel it." Dr. Levin started to object to the unplanned removal of an artifact, but Dr. Cohen placed a restraining hand on his arm, shaking her head slightly. Something in the boys' certainty gave them pause. The climb back to the main cave area was slow and careful. When they finally emerged into the larger base camp, the assembled research team burst into applause at the news of their unprecedented discovery. Sarah rushed to embrace her son, noticing immediately that something had changed. The slight otherworldliness that had characterized him since their arrival in Israel had diminished, his posture and expressions fully those of a normal 10-year-old boy again. "Mom, I'm really hungry," he complained, sounding exactly his age for the first time in weeks. That evening, as the research team celebrated their historic find, Sarah and Ethan sat with Dr. Cohen and the project psychologist in a quiet corner of the camp. The small clay cylinder sat between them on a conservation tray. "Are you sure you want to open it now?" Dr. Cohen asked. "We could analyze it properly in the lab, preserve whatever might be inside." Ethan shook his head. "It needs to be opened here. I'm sure of it." Under careful supervision, the conservator delicately broke the wax seal and removed the small rolled parchment from within the cylinder. As it was carefully unfolded and stabilized, they could see it contained just a few lines of text, written in the same hand as many of the documents they had discovered. Dr. Cohen translated slowly. "To the one who finds these words, you have been chosen as the guardian of memory. What was hidden now returns to light. What was lost is now found. My purpose ends as yours begins. May the Creator guide your path as mine is now complete." Ethan listened intently, a single tear tracking down his cheek. He knew someone would come someday. He left this for whoever would finish what he started. Do you still feel like you're Eleazar? The psychologist asked gently. The boy considered this, then shook his head. Not anymore. The memories are still there, but they're fading like a dream. They don't feel like my memories now, more like a story I heard or a movie I watched. I'm just Ethan again. In the weeks that followed, the archaeological community was transformed by what became known as the sanctuary discovery. The texts recovered from the final chamber included previously unknown religious writings, first-hand historical accounts of the Jewish revolts against Rome, and documents that appeared to date back to the final days of the Second Temple. Most remarkably, among the finds was evidence supporting many of the specific claims Ethan had made before the chamber was discovered. References to people he had named, events he had described, and practices he had detailed that were not previously known to modern scholarship. The boy himself underwent a gradual but complete return to his normal personality. The detailed knowledge of ancient Hebrew and Aramaic faded, as did the ability to recognize archaeological features that had so astounded the experts. Follow-up psychological evaluations showed no signs of the profound connection to the past that had characterized his experience in the caves. 6 months later, Sarah and Ethan attended the opening of a special exhibition at the Israel Museum in Jerusalem, showcasing the initial findings from the Cave of Horror discoveries. As they walked through the climate-controlled displays, Ethan showed the excited interest of any child seeing ancient artifacts, occasionally commenting on their discovery, but without the eerie familiarity he had once demonstrated. Dr. Cohen joined them near a display containing the small clay cylinder and its message, now carefully preserved behind glass. "How are you doing, Ethan?" she asked. "Good," he replied cheerfully. "I like seeing all this stuff, but sometimes it's weird to think I helped find it. It's like it happened to someone else." "In a way, perhaps it did," Dr. Cohen said thoughtfully. Sarah watched her son run ahead to examine a digital reconstruction of the sanctuary chamber. Once again, just an enthusiastic 10-year-old with a passion for history. Whether his experience had been a genuine case of reincarnation memory, some form of genetic recall, or something else entirely remained a subject of intense debate among scholars, psychologists, and religious authorities. A special academic journal dedicated to the discovery included a carefully worded acknowledgement of Ethan's role, noting that the location was identified with the assistance of intuitive archaeology techniques, a deliberately vague phrase that avoided controversial claims while recognizing his contribution. As they prepared to return home to America, Dr. Levin presented Ethan with a special certificate of recognition from the Israel Antiquities Authority and a small replica of one of the jars found in the first chamber. "Whatever the explanation for what happened here," he told the boy, "you've helped recover an invaluable piece of human history. These texts will be studied for generations to come." Ethan accepted the gift with typical childish enthusiasm, but later that night, Sarah found him looking at the replica jar with unusual thoughtfulness. "Do you miss it?" she asked. "Being connected to Eleazar and those memories?" Ethan considered this, turning the replica over in his hands. "Sometimes, but it feels right that they're fading. Like in his note, his purpose is complete, and now it's just me again. Besides," he added with a grin that was pure 10-year-old mischief, "I'd rather make my own history than remember someone else's." As their plane lifted off from Tel Aviv the next day, Sarah watched her son playing a video game, his attention fully in the present. Below them, in secured laboratories throughout Jerusalem, scholars continued the painstaking work of preserving, translating, and understanding the texts that Ethan had helped uncover. Ancient voices speaking once again after nearly 2,000 years of silence, bridging past and present through the unlikely connection of a child who, for a brief and extraordinary moment, had seemed to exist in both.